Hey everyone. I try to review the last podcast before I start my next one, just for recollection of what I talked about and to get a good starting point. And what I also did directly prior to this recording of this one is I grabbed my very first journal where I started journaling. It was suggested to me in my very first treatment to journal. Counselors will usually suggest that, and I actually suggest that to people now when I have the opportunity. You should start journaling. I started journaling. My very first journal I still have. I started journaling in 1994, and September 7th, 1994, I think for me was the very first time in my life that I ever journaled in a way where, keeping a record of my life. And so I left off the last episode with transitioning through the breakup of me and Stephanie. And when I picked up this journal, there it is. I spend my first journals in September really just writing about the struggle of letting go of that relationship. And it was really, really hard for me. I remember the stress and the worry and the really, like, going and seeing if she was home and trying to call her, and she was done. She had moved on, but it took me some time. um and I also remembered, this is a little bit of a shift, but we remember our life in with relationships, and for me with jobs. I sold appliances for a period of time, and I was actually pretty good at it. But what I wasn't good at in sales is selling people things they didn't want. So when you think about appliances, unless you're building a new house or remodeling, you don't really want to buy appliances. So a lot of times people are coming in because their refrigerator broke or something broke. And I was pretty good at upselling in some ways, but this was in the mid 90s, and this is when water filtration systems started becoming a thing in homes. And my boss really pushed these because he made big money off of them, right? And I remember I got paid, I think it was purely commission or basic minimum wage and then commission. I'm not sure. But he was big, really good, big time sales. Obviously, he owned an appliance sales store. He would push, you gotta sell those water filtration systems. And I'm like, dude, they don't want them. Back to the breakup of Stephanie. And I remember because she was always supportive of me bettering my life. She really was. She was really helpful in that way. And our breakup probably lasted, I would say it lasted 6 months, just going maybe a little longer, maybe a year, where there was effort from both of us to try to, you know, stay together. I worked at Brewery City Pizza. She got me a job there. I remember we were trying to stay together there. I think we were together a little bit when I was selling appliances because I remember, just kind of remember. And then I remember when she was done. Um, like if you've gone through a breakup and you're struggling with letting that other person go, you usually know, in your mind and heart when that person is done. But I I just was like hanging on with any thread of hope. And that was hard. And if you've been following my podcast and listening to the story of my life, I went to treatment, and I went to treatment because of crack cocaine. I got told in that treatment that I should also consider quitting everything. That was actually, they were like, no, you need to quit everything. And I did for about a 5 month period ish. And I returned to use, I returned to drinking and smoking pot and dabbling with, old school crank. But it was starting to change. And that's what this podcast will get into, is meth. But I had returned to use. And that was, I think, also something for Stephanie that was a little bit of a deal breaker for her. She drank and she dabbled with drugs a bit, but never to the levels that I did, that I know of. So there I am. I remember I had been living with my stepbrother slash cousin up in northeast Tacoma, and that worked for a little while. But then I ended up moving back to the Tacoma area and moving in with my stepfather, Jerry Emerson, my brother's biological father. And yeah, because I remember this where I was selling appliances. My son, Tyler, he would come over on weekends and I would have to work on weekends. And my grandma Turco used to watch him. She was really helpful. And then my what kind of helped me get over Stephanie is me and this new girl, my third cousin. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Rebecca came into my life, and she she and I hit it off, and we started dating, and it was really just a fling. Um, but it helped me let go of Stephanie. Um, and yeah, so how did I meet meth? Me and Julio were hanging out, childhood friend, um, and I think it was with him that I met meth. You know, I was smoking pot again and I was drinking again. Yes, I remember now. And I'm pretty sure I was working at the appliance store. It was on Center Street. And I remember first doing meth. It's just comical to think back. Similar to crack, when I first smoked crack, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is the best drug ever," right? No, it's not. It's a very powerful drug. It's also a very short-lived drug, meaning the high of crack doesn't last long, and so therefore you're needing more and more and more, and you're always chasing that initial high. It never comes. Right? But meth, I remember the first time I did meth. Now, this is newer meth. So I had done old crank, old school meth. This new meth was, ooh, this is mid 90s. It was powerful, very powerful. And I first started just snorting it and, going, wow, this is great. And I had snorted cocaine along the way. Actually, pretty good amount. I don't know why I've never really talked about it. It was expensive, so I didn't do it a lot. That was probably why I didn't do it a lot, because it was really expensive. This new crank, as they were calling it, new meth, this was cheap. It was really cheap. And unlike crack, it lasted. The high, you could do one line of this mid 90s crank, and you would just like the energy, the endorphins, like, wow, oh my gosh, right? Like I could really talk myself into going back and remembering that, right? And I do. It was like, holy moly, this is great. And I was so productive. I'm almost certain my productivity was selling appliances. Like I had this newfound energy, and boy, it was great, blah, blah, blah. And it was cheap, like for, I think, $20. You could stay up for a whole weekend easy, right? And it was awesome. It was beautiful. Oh boy, this is great. Now, just like crack, that newfound love for this drug, it didn't really last. The addictive qualities, were even more powerful for me than crack. Um, and here's part of why. With crank or meth, you get really high, right? You have all this energy, and you can stay up, and you're so productive, right? And you get so much done. That starts to change for a couple reasons. One, when you're on this drug and you stay up for days, okay, that starts having an effect on your psyche, on your mental capacity. It starts messing with your head just physiologically, right? By not getting sleep, and you don't eat. This was, for a lot of women, this was a very attractive drug, or men who wanted to lose weight, but a lot of women loved this drug because it was, you'd lose weight quickly. That's why you see a lot of people who are on meth, they're really gaunt. I show on this podcast, there's my before and after picture as my profile, and you can see I was like, I don't know if I weighed 110 pounds, maybe, soaking wet. But it had that quality to it in that you lost weight because you didn't eat, and you were just, your body was on hyper mode constantly. Well, here was the downfall of that. And this is where I remember living with my stepdad. I think I called him dad because he was what my family told me was my real father. And at this point in my life, I still believed him to be my real father. I had doubts, but I called him dad. I was staying at his place, this studio apartment. It's still there. These apartments are still there. And I was sleeping on the couch. Literally, we slept in the same room. It was a studio apartment, and so the living room, it had I think they're called trundle beds, the beds that come out of the wall. And he just kept his bed down all the time. He slept on the bed, and I slept on the couch. And I remember this time period really well, living there, because the downfall of that meth, that great drug, was the crash. And you might have heard the term dope sick. And it was the crash. It was your body finally going, I'm sleeping whether you like it or not. And so and I ended up quitting that job at the appliance store. Oh gosh, yeah, I remember getting a job for a short period of time at a Radio Shack. Didn't last long because your whole focus with meth is meth. Um, and then the crash, when you would crash, I remember this. I'm closing my eyes as I'm talking about this because I remember you would sleep for days. Like, just your body would just give out. And I remember on that couch, I've got chills right now thinking about this time period in my life. You would just be out. And I remember my grandma, remember she lived right in the same little apartments. It was just a single level brick apartments. There's actually an apartment complex literally 3 blocks from where we live here in Ellensburg. I know it was built by the same, or was designed by the same architect, because it's exactly the same, and it always reminds me of my grandma's apartment complex and where I lived with Jerry. But they would try to wake me up. They thought something was wrong with me. And, you'd finally come to, and ooh, oh boy, that was a lot. I was already, so keep in mind, if you've been following my story, I was already struggling with massive depression and anxiety. You know, I kind of had started peeling the onion, and I had some knowledge, but I had never been to a mental health therapist at this point. I had just been to that 21-day episode of treatment. I wasn't going to a doctor and taking medication for any of my underlying mental health stuff. So this drug, meth, boy, the endorphins, it just puts your brain on overdrive, just like crack, right? But it lasted so much longer. And the crash was also, on the flip side, that much more devastating. It was terrible. It was worse than crack. It was so much worse than the downside of coming off of crack. It was, you sleep for days, and then when you would come to, it was dark. It was really, really hard. I have never in my life felt that low of a depression, and just physically exhausted. Like, just you're just done. And so this period of my life, I remember you'd start coming to, after being up for days on end. I think during this was the start of about a 2-year period of my really dark side of my life with methamphetamines. And I think I stayed up for about 2 weeks, like literally with no sleep. 2 weeks. Imagine, like you're in a psychosis. You're just, and so the crashes. I remember the first time that I'm visualizing that first time that I crashed, and you start coming to, and I would remember going, oh boy, yeah, no, I don't want this. This is too much. Completely depressed. Thinking about, what were you doing? The behavior that you do with this drug. It's called a sex drug. Like you have your endorphins were so high. And at one point I was living in this dope house with this girl, and it was just, oh my God, you guys, it was so ugly. Alas, these crashes were really difficult to come out of. So here's the cycle of addiction that happens. I remember thinking, I don't know, as I'm recording this, I'm looking in my journal to see if I think I have a writing where I said that I didn't want this, right? In fact, has been a blur. I went today. It sounds pretty positive. Month and a half. And yeah, here we go. This is 12/5 of 94. I'm going to read this. I went today to talk to John. This was my boss at the appliance store. So I had quit and went on a run with meth. And I can tell you just by this. So October 15th, I have a journal entry where I had met Rebecca and things had become a blur, and I was feeling really good. But I'm positive I met meth not long after this, because my next journal entry is 2 months later. I had been journaling pretty regularly. And so it was in December of 94. I went today to talk to John about getting my job back. It sounds pretty positive. The last month and a half has been pretty much hell. I've let myself down in many ways that only I can correct, and I will correct. I need to stay away from relationships altogether until I get my life together. I feel like giving up a lot now, and that is not me. Before Rebecca showed up, I was on the right track, but when she showed up, I let everything derail completely. I still think of Stephanie and sometimes wish we were together, but it's been 5 months now, and my feelings have moved on. I wish for her the best. I started my feelings for Cindy again. Interesting. That's my son's mother. But as always, it's just not there. Me and Rebecca barely get along. I know that someday I will find that someone, but I don't think it will happen until I find myself. I'm okay with just me for now. Not always, but for the most part, I'm okay. Yeah. The drug use had begun. Oh, here we go. So that was on 12/7, 2 days later. So, yep, this is. Once you come out of that being dope sick and you start coming awake again, for me, the weight of, my life at that time, I wasn't happy with my life. The cycle of addiction starts, and you think, well, I'm just going to do it one more time just to kind of help me come alive again. 2 days later, the pressure to do what I know is best for me is great right now. I'm fighting many urges to do what I know would just leave me feeling guilty. I've lost some willpower, and I'm fighting myself to get it back with a quickness. I can resist the urge. I'm better than what I'm telling myself. I'm fighting using again. 12/16. It's been a week. Oh boy. I haven't read this in a while, you guys. 12/16. It's been a week since my last entry. I tried the best I could to fight the urge, and unfortunately the urge won. Maybe for the better. Oh God. Because what I went through showed me once again what the drug scene can get me. I'm going to tell you guys what happened after I read this, because it's wild. I guess it would be easiest to give into life and end up on the street or dead. But I know I want more than that. I want a job and I want my own place. I want my bills taken care of and I want a sense of security within myself. I have people around me who really care and want me to do well. I need to stay around those people and stay away from the people who are going nowhere. I have a son who needs a father to provide for him. So I will start again to make my life what I want it to be. Here is a list of things I will not let in my life. 1, drugs. 2, negative people. 3, negative thinking. I will keep my thoughts on what is going to get me ahead and not backwards. This is my life and I'm going to control it. My next journal entry, and I'm not going to read it yet. My next journal entry, so this was on 12/16 of 94. My next journal entry is 8/14 of 95. I would end up going on just a crazy run with meth. But I got to tell you what had happened. And I wish I could say, and when you hear this story, I know I've told this story in different venues, but I'm not sure if I've told it on this podcast. And men, it's okay to cry. I was at this dope house. I started seeing this girl, and this house is still there. I love driving by it now when I go back to Tacoma. It's off of 6th and Proctor. I love going to it now because it's a nice house now. This house was disgusting. It was gross in all ways. But it was a dope house and there was always activity. Not usually during the day, usually in the middle of the night. There were people in and out, and I can only imagine what the neighbors, those poor neighbors who lived in that house, because we would literally have our cars in the lawn in the middle of the night with floodlights on them, fixing them. When you're on this drug, you're not fixing shit. You're just tweaking. If you've heard that term, you're just like, you get focused on one thing and you think you're fixing it and you're not. You're just running in fucking circles, and that's just your whole life, and it's crazy. So there's just all this activity at this house, and I was dating the girl who lived in the house with her 2 small children, and we used to do most of our drugs upstairs, away from the kids. The kids didn't know. Alas, this one particular night, it's in that December. It was like probably just a couple days before this. Mid-December, it was Christmas time. Somehow we had put a Christmas tree up in the living room, probably high. But on this one particular evening, we had decided to take a break. We had almost always did our drugs on the 2nd floor of this house. And so we were downstairs in the living room, just hanging out. No, there was no activity. And we were watching TV. And that was what was really odd. Like maybe we were just out of drugs. I don't know. The whole night was kind of weird. It was a December night in Tacoma. So there was fog, and we used to walk to the store. The store's still there. It's probably changed hands. Just a local convenience store. I remember walking to that store earlier in that night and it just feeling like a really, really weird night. Just felt off. Yeah, you might think, well, yeah, you were high. Of course it was off. But no, I remember it very well. And so we're sitting in this living room watching TV. There was me, the girl, the kids were in bed, and there were 1 or 2 other people there. And I remember feeling just kind of that paranoid when you're high on this drug or even coming off of this drug. And after effects can happen, just this paranoia. You think the FBI is watching, people are watching you. I remember just that kind of having that feeling. Alas, we're sitting there Oh, and one of my followers told me I say that word a lot on my podcast. Alas. I'm sorry. We're sitting there watching TV in this dope house that on this particular evening, not a lot of activity, and we hear this car pull up. Not too unusual. We hear it because it's got a loud exhaust. And we're, just sitting there and thinking someone's going to come to the door. And then bang, 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 shots fire. We just freaking, she starts screaming. I hit the floor. I just did. I was able to find the phone. I grabbed the phone. I called 911. And, I'm on the phone with 911 and I'm like, there's someone's shooting at the house. And they're like, okay, so the 911 operator keeps me on the phone. Officers are on their way, and those initial shots rang out, and I can hear the car. So I'm just I'm like, we're gonna die because they're coming to the house. They're gonna kill us. Stay on the phone, and I don't remember how long it was between the time I got on the phone with 911 and when they showed up, but it felt like obviously eternity, felt like forever. But the 911 operator's like walking me through this. Stay on the phone. They're on their way. And the 911, they're at the house, and I'm like, I can hear the car out there right now. She's like, the police are coming. They're here. They're at the house, and she's walking me through. They're coming up on the porch right now. You're going to hear them knock on the door. And I remember hearing the knock. When she said they're going to knock, they knocked, and I'm like, I hear the car. I'm like worried. I'm going to open the door, and it's not going to be the cops. I open the door, and there's the cops. Tacoma Police. There's one cop on the porch, and it's dark. It's night, and there's another cop or two. I remember one being off of the porch in the yard with the flashlight, and the car's gone. Don't see or hear the car now. The car that I just heard. I heard the car. And now, mind you, police had been to this house. This wasn't an unusual thing. It was a dope house. And he's like, well, he doesn't really believe that the house got shot at. And I'm like, no, someone was here. They shot at the house, and the cop that was in the yard took his flashlight and flashed it. He was flashing on the front of the house and didn't see anything. And then he pointed his flashlight to the second floor. And he said to his partner, there's bullet holes in the second floor windows. The windows were shot out, and there were holes in the side of the house, the front of the house on that second floor. Had we not, on that particular night, for whatever reason, been in where we almost always were, which was upstairs on the second floor, I probably wouldn't be here to tell you this story. So you call it God, you call it higher power, you call it the universe. Someone was watching over us on that night. And so the police, they're like, hey, we need to come in now because they saw the bullets. And we're freaking out. Not like internally, I'm like, oh God, I'm going to jail, which wasn't too unusual. I'd been to jail, and I had been stealing and burglarizing houses and, driving with a suspended license and doing all the crime, all the stuff. So going to jail wasn't out of the question. I'd already been there before. They come in and they go upstairs, to investigate. Now they had a reason to come in, and we're just sitting down there. I remember thinking, oh, all our paraphernalia was up there. We didn't have any dope, so we're thinking, oh God, but we're going to jail. I'm just, okay, going to jail as soon as they come down. And they were up there, and we're sitting in the living room just waiting to go to jail, and they come down, and they said, well, okay, yep, you got shot at, and they just left. And that was that night. That journal entry that I wrote on 12/16 is, you would think that would have been enough. It was not. I would continue on the path with meth. This period of my life is what I call the really dark times of my life. I would not have a relationship with my son. The drug completely took over my life, completely. I couldn't hold a job. What I had been able to stay, drinking and smoking pot, pretty functional, being a dad, it was all gone. The only focus of my life from that point until really February of 96, because I have journal entry. My next journal entry, I think I'll kind of close it and then close up this one with reading that one. I wouldn't find my way back to treatment until it was late February, early March of 1996. So I would go on a meth run literally for looks like about a year and a half, somewhere in there. And yeah, um, I ended up being a convicted felon. Something that I actually write about in there. I never accepted. My first felony was for possession of meth. My second felony was for burglary. My life for that period of time was what you see when you hear about people on heavy drugs and turning into criminals and on the streets. My stepdad and grandma, they just didn't even want me around because they figured out what was going on. So I was staying at that dope house, or I was couch surfing, and there was a period of time when I just wasn't even. I didn't even have really a permanent place to live because no one wanted me there. I had a car, and I I had a Mustang, a 19, was it an 85 Mustang? Anyway, but I didn't have a license. My license was suspended, and so I would get pulled over. My driving abstract by the end of this was 2 pages long, driving while license suspended, no insurance, speeding, or whatever else I was doing. I was just racking up tons of fines in that area. Obviously, I wasn't paying any of my other bills, so my debt was loading. I wasn't paying child support because I didn't have a job. I couldn't keep a job. In fact, I didn't even try looking for a job for that period of time when I was out on the streets. Just you call it running and gunning, just the crazy life of being a drug user, meth head, if you call it, criminal. And it was ugly. I did things, I saw things, I participated in things I wouldn't wish on anyone. I was not a father to my son, um, and it lasted until it would last heavily until I'm going to go ahead and read this journal entry that I would put in. Um, looks like 9 months later in August of 1995. So August 14th of 1995. Wow. It's been 2 days short of 8 months since I wrote in this journal. To be honest, I don't remember too much of those 8 months. What I do know is that I want to forget, and I've forgotten most of those 8 months. I have been on drugs, been a drug dealer, lied, cheated, stole, and have broken my heart several times. I'm now a convicted felon, which I've still not accepted. I'm far away from where I feel I should be. I feel a lot of guilt, have few true friends, have yet to, sorry, have few true friends, have yet to find a relationship worth having. I've drifted far from my son, and in the last 2 months brought that back to a level I'm now comfortable with. I've gained back some respect for myself and others. I'm now 28 years old and personally dissatisfied with my life. I've done things I said I would never again do, but thanks to God and my family, I'm regaining pieces of my life and I'm once again stepping in the direction I want to be in. I'm still wanting to find or meet a good quality woman to share my life with. I haven't found her yet, and for the most part, I'm not worrying too much about it. Me and my dad, this I'm talking about Jerry Emerson, have become closer because of the events in the last month. Me and my son have become closer because of the events in the last months. The best way I can explain the last 8 months can be summed up to say drugs, drugs, and more drugs. The drug called crank, the drug called crack, the drug called marijuana. Crank was the major contributor to the most of the chaos. I will regain control of my life and my dreams so I can feel content when I sleep. It seems like it's been a couple of years or more. I'm glad to be back in control of my mind and my actions. And then I have a journal entry. It looks like a monthish later, and it's I've continued steps to improve. I quit smoking. On dates before that, I've quit everything else. Oh yeah, now there's another woman that comes into my life. Me and Wendy are partially back together. Oh my gosh. I wish I could make things easier on her. She's worried that I'm going to return to drugs, and I don't know what to say to cause her worry, to ease her worry. I guess I just have to let her work through it. I care and love her. Then I think she knows and wouldn't let anything ruin that. When we're together, we have more fun than when I'm with any other woman. Carolyn, this was a friend, has been the best of friends to me, and I'm happy God, I forgot all about Wendy. I met Wendy when I was at Loomis. Yeah, me and Stephanie, that long breakup, we had kind of started breaking up. We actually broke up after that first treatment, and I had met Wendy. She was a bank teller, and we had a good relationship for a short period. Um, but I wouldn't find real recovery until, well, February 21st of 1996. It would take a while. That really dark period um, was that period from that December through that September. And then for anyone who's in long-term recovery or any kind of recovery, it's not always just, okay, I'm done and you quit. And it wasn't that way for me. I would actually end up getting charged and convicted with my second felony for behavior during that time for burglarizing houses. I also didn't talk about, I would end up stealing credit cards from Lynn Gilmore, the man who sexually accused me. And then used his stolen credit cards. I would do what was called mailbox shopping. None of these things I'm proud of. And I just cringe at the thought that I did that shit. But this was in the 90s, and you would get your credit card mailed to your home, and so I would just mailbox shop, steal people's mail, hoping to get a credit card, and then I would activate it and use it. And like I said, I was a burglar for a period, and got caught and got convicted. So I would end up being a convicted felon, and that's something that I never accepted. In that, yeah, I accepted, yeah, I deserved it. But I've been fortunate as I go through the story of my life that in 2010, after many years of recovery and many years post conviction, I was able to petition the courts and have my record vacated. But that would take a while. So I would, start slowly climbing out of this dark period in my life, and would find my way back to treatment at Olala in March of 1996. And that is where my life would really start seeing some dramatic change for the good, for the duration, I say. So there it is. So the hope for you, I like to do hope at the end of these, is recovery works and lives change. Here I sit. Next month, I will celebrate 18 years of recovery. Directly prior to that, I enjoyed 10 and a half years of recovery from that February. It was actually February 21st of 96 till the fall of '06. I had tons of progress and positive change in my life, which you'll hear me talk about as I go through the story of my life with this podcast. I took what I say was a little hiatus from recovery, returned to use in '06, and was fortunate to get back. But the hope is recovery does happen for people. And I like to say, don't ever give up hope. I think about that period, that really dark period in my life where I was off the rails and a criminal and all the behavior. And I'll never forget the conversation that I had outside of this dope house that I was living in for that period of time with a friend that I had known for a while. And him and we talked not too awfully long ago. And I'll never forget him having a talk with me, and him going, because him and we drank and smoked pot together. But when meth started hitting Pierce County, which not a fun thing for Pierce County, but Pierce County was actually the meth capital of the world for a period of time, and I was all up in it. But I remember him trying to talk to me and saying, David, dude, this isn't you, And did it work? Not necessarily. I would end up doing the drugs, but that always kind of stuck in my head. And that always stuck in my head in a way that I was like, dude, remember what Leon said, and come on, get out of this. It did help. Cindy, my son's mother, she would set very good boundaries with me, with my son, rightly so. I wasn't able to see my son for a period of time, but she also, I knew she was there for me when I needed help, and she was a significant person in my life, that was positive for me. She didn't give up hope on me. She set boundaries with me, which were really important. And there were other people who did that same thing for me. It would be my sister, in that in 95. Yeah, it was before I went to treatment in 95, I'm pretty sure, where she bailed me out of jail. I had gotten arrested on a warrant for burglary. This was when I was trying to, get out of the crazy, but, some things follow you and you have to be held accountable. And so I got picked up on that warrant and got put in jail, where my sister recognized that, one, she has always been a champion for me. And she was like, well, he's trying to make change. I don't know what the conversation was, but she bailed me out of jail and said, hey, you're making some of these positive movements. She didn't give up hope on me, is what I'm saying. Healthy boundaries for sure, but don't ever give up hope. Because I'm just one example of many who have been able to turn their lives around. And so if you're out there struggling and you follow my journey, know that you can turn it around. I believe in you. I want better for you, and I want you to want better for yourself and your family. Man, like, think about your family. Like, my family has benefited greatly from my decision to put down drugs and alcohol and turn my life around. I hope for everyone a good day, and love to all.